Are soul loss and post-traumatic stress disorder, are they similar? And how are the treatments different? Well, I was a psychotherapist after I was a nurse, and finding in my career as a nurse and then as a psychotherapist that lots of people experienced post-traumatic stress. And it looked to me, once I began to study shamanism and get involved with that, it looked to me like the two had similar symptoms. There was hypervigilance, there was insomnia, there was avoidance of triggers, and there was something missing with almost all of them. They felt disoriented, detached, disengaged. And so leaving my post-traumatic stress of my psychotherapy job, because I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I couldn't help people heal with just talking about it. Finding the shamanic path and the way of having spirit guides and allies and doing ritual and reuniting yourself with those parts of you that fragmented off, because that's what happens in post-traumatic stress. Medicine doesn't talk about this because they don't talk about the whole person and the soul. They talk about your symptoms and alleviating your symptoms. But underlying those symptoms is a traumatic event. And when you go and talk about the trauma, in my opinion, and the reason that I stopped doing psychotherapy is that you're re-traumatizing yourself over and over and over, and then, oh, sorry, 55 minutes is up. Well, I found that unacceptable. And so what I did was I left that world to go into the other world reality, where you don't have to re-traumatize yourself by talking about it. You don't numb yourself out by taking medication that block the symptoms. What you do is you have the ability to reunite with those parts of you that fragmented off. Now, if you think about something like a car accident, and, most of us have been in car accidents, you'll notice those 3 or 4 days after the accident where you're hypervigilant, you're not sleeping, you're a little anxious. And when you get to a place where someone else is driving, you notice that you're backseat driving from the passenger seat. All of these things cause us to not want to go anywhere, to not be engaged in our life fully. What I found from doing my psychotherapy job for decades was that talking about it didn't get the job done. What happened was that we re-traumatized ourselves by going back and re-entering and re-experiencing that event, which is why lots of folks don't go to get help, because you re-traumatize yourself. Every cell of your body feels that, just like the original trauma. Now, what happens with soul retrieval and the shamanic practice is someone like me goes on a journey, invites your soul parts that have fragmented off, that are causing you to be hypervigilant, to be in an insomniac. We invite them to come back. And as they come back, and as they're willing to come back, they recognize that they're separate from you and they don't want that any longer, and you don't want it any longer. You want to be enjoying your life, living full on, and being in the camaraderie of your family and your friends and the world, and enjoying music and dance and all that the world has to offer. So in a soul retrieval, what happens is we go and we invite that part of you that fragmented off, no matter how long ago it was, to come home. When they come back, then it's our joy and our responsibility to connect with them, to communicate with them. Let's say, for example, something traumatic happened to you that you don't recall, that is unconscious to you. But in a soul retrieval, I say, well, something happened when you were 4, and what I see is a screen door and you on the inside and your parents on the outside, and this was really traumatic to you. Nobody explained that they were going to come back. They were just out there and you were in there. So what happens is a piece of our soul fragments off because we're scared, because we don't know that they're coming back. Nobody tells a 4-year-old, well, in the olden days, nobody tells a 4-year-old that, we're just going up for a few hours. We'll be back. So-and-so's going to look after you until we get back. And so this little person sees them leaving and then is like, oh, maybe they're never coming back. I'm abandoned. And from that moment on, abandonment becomes a thing. We abandon ourselves. When our friends leave, we feel regret and remorse. So when someone like me is able to go and say to that 4-year-old, you're welcome home now. And then you, hey Alicia and Susan and Michael, so when you have that soul part come back and they're 4 years old, then you do 4-year-old things. You go and you take them and you go out for a swing. When you get in your car, now this may all sound silly. The however is that this is stuff that works. When you go and you're going to the park to go on a swing with them because that's what they want to do, you actually put them, open the car door, put them in there, buckle them up, drive them over there, to open the door, let them get out, and then you go and have a swing with them. Years ago, one of my clients, a man, had a soul part come back that was 7 years old. Now, this soul part wanted to go to a baseball game, wanted to have a beer and have an ice cream. And so my client said, well, we're not having a beer. The however is that at 7, that person was having beer. Their parents were feeding them alcohol. So for them to come back and want that is perfectly normal and natural. The response of my client to say, no, we're not going to have a beer. For sure, we will have ice cream and we'll go to a ball game. But that good parenting allows that soul part to feel safe, to feel cared for, and we'll reunite with you. It takes a little time, but they integrate into you and you find yourself not so hypervigilant, not so anxious, not so worried about, do I know exactly what's going to happen? How's it going to work out? So that holding on to being sure, to being certain, to being stable is allowed to not rule your life anymore. And regardless of the age of the soul part that comes back, there's always something for us to do with them. Like when you're 4, maybe you get to have bedtime stories. Maybe you get a bubble bath. Maybe you get to snuggle with your mom or your dad or your siblings in bed. All of these things help that little soul part feel much more safe, much more secure. So I came away from using the medical model, and I guess they're up to DSM-5 now and all the criteria for post-traumatic stress. And as I got into doing the shamanic work, because of my healing background, because of my passion for understanding the psychology behind things, I'm then able to use what I know from the medical model and combine it with the shamanic healing so that you have the ability to heal fully, to integrate into your life all those soul parts that come back, known or unknown, seen or unseen, conscious or unconscious. Because sometimes things happen when we're itty bitty and they make an imprint on us that we don't actually recognize. It's not a conscious kind of thing. We don't go, oh, I really don't like suckers, and I'm never eating one. We don't know why we have that. But perhaps it's because when we were little, we were denied a sucker and we decided to never want one ever again. Because if I can't have it, I'm not going to want it. And so we live our life out of these traumatic events. So using the medical model of the criteria for post-traumatic stress, looking at the criteria for soul loss, they're pretty much a match. So when we begin to want to heal that part of ourselves, we have options, right? You can go to a psychotherapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or you can go to a shamanic practitioner and use a more natural method of doing that. You can even combine the two with somebody like me who has the nursing background, who has the psychotherapy background, and who also 30 years ago, 35 years ago, started exploring the shamanic path, found that this was more effective, easier, more loving, and more caring for the person than giving them a pill. So I quit my soul-sucking day job. It'll be 27 years next month, to be able to follow this passion, to be able to help people heal in a way that's not, we're not introducing things into the body that are unfamiliar. We're using what comes in a journey. We're finding out that you can partner with those old parts of yourself, heal all of that, and live a joyous and fabulous life. And so if you've experienced post-traumatic stress and you are still feeling lost or disconnected or like something is missing, find someone like me or me, and then let's do that practice for you. Let's help you heal. And what happens with this healing is that there are actually 3 sessions. The first session is one where I do the soul retrieval for you. And then I tell you about what I saw in my vision, what I saw on my journey. And then the second session, after I tell you that, and then you give me some feedback about what's accurate. And by golly, I'm always just blown away by the accuracy of the journey and the traumatic events. So once we do that, once we know, oh, there was a 4-year-old, a 12-year-old, however old, then together in the next 2 sessions, we do the integration. And it is beautiful, it's healing, it's one of the most joyous processes that I've ever found. You find that you have a 12-year-old, a 4-year-old, a whatever-year-old, 38-year-old, and then you begin to be in dialogue with them. You take them with you. You show them what your life is like now compared to what it was when that traumatic event happened. As you begin to spend time with them and you eat their favorite foods and you do the things they want to do, you go to the park, you read bedtime stories, you have bubble bath, you do all of these physical things because you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. So it's a very physical process. You do all of those things. So first the soul retrieval. 2 weeks later, we check in. How are things going? Do you remember this part? Because often in our crazy, busy lives that we tend to gravitate toward, keep ourselves busy so that we can't feel the feelings, then part of what happens is there's a slowing down. There's an ability to spend time reading a bedtime story, to have a bubble bath, to go to the park, to begin to expand your awareness into the joy and the bliss and the fun that children are meant to have. As this integration happens, healing happens. And so we check in. We check in 2 weeks, and then we check in 3 weeks after that. So for about 6 weeks, you're held in this healing process of integrating your lost soul parts. Then you can continue in my membership program and do journeys with me. You can come and do a 6-week course or a 12-week course, or maybe you're complete for that moment. It's a very freeing, it's a very joyous process. And in this, what we do is we come towards enlightenment. To be enlightened means to lighten up. When you are struggling, when you feel like you're lost, when you feel like you're disconnected, when you feel like no one cares, and then you find out that you have soul parts that are there for you, just like you're there for them, then there is this merging that happens. And what I've heard from my clients is they feel more whole, they feel more happy, they feel more content. The problems that they were having, the sleeplessness starts to go, the lack of appetite, the hypervigilance about feeling like I have to be on guard all of the time, it begins to assuage as these parts come back and as you care for them. So I wanted to just bring that to your attention, that post-traumatic stress and soul loss have very similar symptoms. They're treated very differently because of in my opinion, the more holistic shamanic practice, as opposed to, I'm going to give you something to assuage the symptoms. And in my opinion, when you are active in your own therapy, it works better. When you're showing up for a group once in a while or weekly and talking about it, in my opinion, I didn't want to participate in that any longer because I felt like I was contributing to the trauma. So I stopped doing that. I know the process. But now what I do is something that is more kind, more gentle, more compassionate, and actually has you collaborating. So you are participating in your healing rather than just talking about it and taking medications. Medications have their place, absolutely, and I don't deny that. But how would you like to be able to heal yourself by joining with your soul parts, by collaborating with them, by cooperating, and by communicating, so that you have a life that you really love, that is joyous for you, and that you feel whole and happy and blissful. So, just take a moment and put your hands on your heart and feel, is there anywhere in you that feels lost, that feels separate from, that feels disconnected, that feels like something is missing? And you're welcome to connect with me, to have a dream call. I call it a dream call because we're waking up your dreams. And so it's 45 minutes, completely complimentary. We find out what's important to you and the best way for you to get to what's important to you. So thank you for being here. If you're watching the replay, blessings on you. And remember, in case no one has told you so far today, you are amazing. All right, everyone, have a lovely rest of your day. I appreciate you. And let's just open to freely give all the love that we would love to feel. All right, bye-bye, everyone.